The word photograph, coined by John Herschel in 1839, literally means drawing with light. The word photo meaning light and the word graphy meaning drawing. It's the art of taking reflected light that bounces all around us and focusing it on a media to create an image that is pleasing in the camera. Did you catch the word reflects in there? Most light that we see isn't actually directly from the source of the light. Sometimes when we look at the source of a light, it's usually very bright and we can't look directly into it. But the light that we actually see is reflected off of different objects. It bounces around and it'll bounce onto one object, reflect onto another object, and then onto another object. And it causes all kinds of things like color casts and reflections. It's kind of like when the sun is shining on the moon and the moon reflects the light back on the earth. On a dark night, it can light up all of the ground from the reflected light, because the moon, of course, doesn't have any light of its own, but is just reflecting the light from the sun. So think about that for a minute. Almost everything that we see is actually just reflected light. And every object that we potentially look at could be reflecting light from another object. So every object, in a sense, then could become a mirror or show a reflection of some kind. Now, some surfaces are more dull than others, and some are more colored than others, and aren't flat enough to whatever. It can do different things to the light, so you don't always see the reflection. But almost every object actually has a reflection in it of things that are sourcing the light or have the light has bounced off of. Some of them need to be focused and so on. But again, remember, all of that light's reflected, so a lot of different surfaces can reflect light, and you can get an image that is a reflected image of something else. As photographers, it's our job to try and capture a little bit of that light as it's reflected from one source to another and focus it onto our media to capture an image that is pleasing to the person who views it. This month, in our Epic Challenge, I want you to think about how light is reflected around, how light reflects off one object and onto another object. There's all kinds of ways that you can capture images that show reflections. You could capture an image of a hubcap that reflects something. You could even capture an image that's taken in sunglasses that reflects something else. You could take an image that's reflected in glass or on a car or just about any surface that will reflect. Now, I have a little setup behind me here that I'm just going to demonstrate one little thing, and we're going to try this in our Epic meeting. We can have a little bit of fun with it and see what kind of images we can come up with. I'm actually recording this video on my nicer camera, so I'm going to use my little Sony here. It's a mirrorless camera. It's basically a point and shoot, but it does have some nice features on it too that help me to take a little nicer pictures, but meaning that I can basically use it in manual mode. We're going to take some images with this, and you'll see them here in a minute as we go. So I have my little setup here. It's very simple. I have a mirror on a piece of black cloth that has the black cloth draped over it so that the cloth is actually reflecting on the mirror, and that gives me a black background to be able to work with. I have a reflector on the side here to bounce a little bit of light back, and I could just use a practical light on the other side to give some light into the subject and bounce it around a little bit and make it work. Now, I'm not using any special lighting this time. I'm just using the normal ambient light that's around me here, mostly because I want you to see what you could do with just basic setups. You don't need any fancy equipment, just a regular camera. I would suggest a tripod if you're shooting in light like this because it's not very bright and your exposures are going to have to be a little bit longer. You're going to want to make sure they're nice and steady. So I'm going to actually use that camera right now, and I'm setting it into manual mode. And I'm going to change the ISO to 3200 because, again, I'm using ambient light, so I don't have a lot of light around to be able to make it work properly. And I'm setting the aperture to f10. I'm doing that because I want a relatively deep depth of field. I don't want it to be too narrow. So I'm setting that to f10. And then I'm going to set my exposure so that it works with those. And I'm actually going to underexpose the image just slightly. I'm setting it to 1/4 of a second in this case, to make the black get a little bit deeper and the subject will show better. Now, you can pick any objects that are around. I'm just going to use some bars here that I have, and we'll just put that on there. Now, the mirror needs to be clean. And you might need to clean off, especially if you've been doing different things on the mirror, you might need to clean off whatever residue or things you left lying on the mirror there. So we'll just give it a wipe every once in a while. Now I'm just going to put that down on the glass, just any old way for now, and we'll get back to the camera here, and we just take a picture. Now that's kind of boring because the reflection is really just the package itself, so you need to get a little bit creative, and in this case, okay, I've got two of them, so maybe I can put both packages on there and take that picture. That's a little bit better, but it's still kind of boring, so you know, we probably want to see what's in the packages. So I'm going to open one up, and I'll take out one of these little crunchy bars. And we can lay that back kind of where it was, and maybe put the crunchy bar on top. And that looks a little bit nicer. It's getting better all the time. But you see now, this is a place where the mirror can be a little bit dirty, because we got a few crumbs there, and I'm actually going to maybe make a few more. I'm going to break it over it so that I actually get some crumbs on there. And then I'm going to lay out the bar. Actually, I'm going to take out the other one here too, so I have a whole one. The package luckily stays pretty much intact. You can have some fun trying to lay these out, get the nicest way. I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing that right now, because I just want to demonstrate what we're doing here. Of course, you want to make sure that the reflections that are in the mirror are only the ones that you want, and that the edge is not showing if you can. Some of that can be taken out in Photoshop later, but you know, the more you can do in camera, the better, right? Now there is one small problem with regular mirrors, and that's going to happen on this mirror that we have as an example here. You might actually see two reflections on there because one is being reflected from the actual glass and one is being reflected from the mirror. The only way to resolve that is to find a mirror where the mirror is actually on the front, or a very shiny piece of metal or something like that that reflects very nicely but only has one surface to reflect. And that's how you would take care of that. There you go, a very simple way to get a photograph using reflections. Now let's go and try it. As always, be creative and have fun, and let's see those images next month of your reflections.